writing music score for horror is being diligent about paying attention to the story, the arc of the story, and everything that's happening within the film, which sounds very obvious, but with horror it's elevated because the sound is so crucial to what's happening, right? So it's I feel like there's a high need to lurk in the shadows with the music, and sort of figure out like the right moments to be there and the right moments to just be out of the way completely, because it makes those impacts felt even more, right? And there's like even like rhythm is like the worst way to like ruin tension, right? Because even if it's like speed metal, right? There is tension in that, but it's very, you're getting a constant pulse, even if you're changing like time signatures, you're getting like a pulse.
It's true.
And I think keeping things unexpected leave audiences feeling unsure as to what's going to happen, right?
I think also too that like it's always changing for every project, and sometimes it's changing in the same film. So sometimes you need to be finger pointy. Sometimes you're getting requested to sting something over the top, which maybe you don't think is appropriate, but that's what's being asked of you. And I think that because it's an ever-changing and evolving landscape, I think it becomes tricky for composers to know when to pull back, to know how much melody is too much melody. And I think also it's like, what is the creatives, what is the team, what is the director trying to tell with his storytelling or her storytelling?
Yeah.
And I think it's important to be so aware of that. And I think, as you said, it's like sometimes, what did Debussy say? Like silence is the between the notes. You know, that's what's important, is the silence.
Yeah.
So I think having to know where that, when to be quiet and when to pull back is massively important.
Production plays a huge part in horror scores, because I feel like you have to self-edit, because
all the time
you're going to naturally, as a musician, want to play something, even if it's like a drone or a pad or like a single note or something. And oftentimes that is the wrong answer, but it's really hard to like divorce yourself from that, I think. So a lot of times it's like the coming in the morning, right? And hitting spacebar and going like, wow, that's a nice piece of music, but terribly wrong for the scene. Like I'm not scared, there's no tension. And the trick is the balance, I think, right?
I think too, when on like super dark projects, super dark films, I feel like it can be slightly draining. I remember watching The Shining. It was just like such a brilliant film, but when I was done, I was like exhausted.
Yeah, you're exhausted from in the best way. When you watch The Shining, it's like you're assaulted in a strange way, like, right? Like not like mentally in a bad way, but like you feel
so much
tread upon by like
which is incredible.
Yeah, it's an incredible film, and I think the music plays a big part in that, right?
Huge part of that.
Yeah, and I think that's a great example. Yeah,
I think cliches are an interesting thing when it comes to, well, just music in general, but specifically with horror, because you're always trying to be different. And usually the requests are to be different. And I think it's important to have, obviously a signature sound, and to try that's sort of bespoke to the project. Everybody's trying to find something different. And then a lot of times they fall back on the typical string stabs, the typical bending of a sound, or something that ends up being more consistent with what we're, being either requested or it's in the temp or people want to hear more of. But I think doing something really out there takes, I mean, maybe you'd agree with me, but like takes freedom from the director and the creatives to do something wild.
Yeah.
Whether it's, a giant hurdy-gurdy, or to use peacocks in a score, or whatever it may be, something crazy and wild that might be a complete failure, but you have this concept for it that's different.
Yeah.
I think that requires a bit of a trust amongst your team to allow you to do that.
Yeah, because there's an emotional investment in a lot of cliches.
True.
And for good reason. On the, like you and I are always talking about like commerce and art, right? And how
Always.
those two things do not get along. The emotional investment in cliches is like, oh, this has worked. Like if we scare people here, it's proven that they're gonna feel their blood is gonna spike, or whatever, their heart rate's gonna go up, or whatever. And that may be all. That's fine and good and the truth in some cases. But like, I think being able to really stay away from cliches means you're not going to just do it and land and be like, I stuck the landing, right?
Yeah.
You're going to have to fail. Like, and I think that's what makes like the collaboration fun too, is that we can sort of like fail together in places where it's just like, oh, this is a ridiculous idea.
Yeah.
But I think in sort of sorting out what's ridiculous about it, I think it allows like new ground to be slowly sort of like not taken over, but like approached, right? I think Midnight Mass and Dr. Sleep are good examples of like figuring out a road and really leaning into that road, and huge props to Mike for
giving us a chance,
especially on Midnight Mass, right?
That was weird.
He was really excited about sort of our first pass at the Midnight Mass score. And I was worried we were going to get fired because it was so like
weird,
ridiculously like out there, and looking back, it seems so obvious, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I rewatched the show a few weeks ago and was like, wow, I was really proud of like what we did there. But I had to remember that like that was pretty scary to like present that score as like, here's an idea, like 45 seconds of silence, but that's part of the cue.
And that's even with someone who gives us that chance, the freedom to like do something super off the wall, weird.
Yeah.
And there's still always that trepidation about like, is this going to work?
Yeah.
I think key ingredients for a horror score, it's so subjective, but I think one thing they have in common, as you've already said, is just knowing when to be silent. I think that's very, very important, because if you give away something by adding music or exposing something, it just ruins the film. It tells the story that you don't want to tell. So I think silence is golden. Also, I think, unfortunately, is that jump scares are a thing. And it's always about the biggest, craziest, most impactful jump scare sound you can have. And I think it's important that you have to think about so many elements, because sometimes there's noise or screams on top of that. So it's about frequency. It's funny enough that it sounds so silly and ridiculous because it's so simple, but if you listen to some jump scares, they really lack low end or they lack high end, and it's like balancing that to get the most push to cause that reaction, which I think most composers probably aren't like super stoked to, super excited to do that.
And the performance of instruments in a vulnerable way, I feel like is like
that's true.
It's like that's very broad, but
needed.
Yeah, it's necessary.
Yeah.
And in a lot of films, and whether it's just like a solo instrument, you don't even have to be very good at it. Just that it evokes like some imperfect like imbalance in something, I feel like is a cliche that works very nicely.
And tension.
Yeah.
Tension.
Yeah.
I want to feel like I'm going to die or be scared any second. I feel people gravitate their ear towards things that, remind them of something, but it's a little bit different.
Yeah.
And you're always trying to push your boundaries, to be more creative. And at some point, there's so many synthesizers. At the end of the day, you have your only so many sounds that you can manipulate and tweak. At that point, you're going to step out into the zone of more organic sounds. You're going to, go into nature and animals. And then it's about, well, how can you use those? Like when we recorded the peacocks and the Grudge and use those in the score. I think, again, there you go. I was just walking the dog and
you're out walking the dog, right? And you're like, what's that?
It's super disturbing. And I think they were like mating or calling out or something.
Yeah.
So I just went out there, recorded some, and then we processed it and stuck it in the film. And I remember the director too was like, what is that? And we were like, oh, it's a peacock.
Yeah.
Processed.
Yeah. But very effective, right? It's those organic elements that I think have a nice sort of texture to them. Like, whereas like on the synths, it's sort of the noise generator, which helps to, I mean, not entirely, but I feel like for me at the end of coming up with a sound, the noise generator is sort of my last go-to add just the right amount of like
Grit.
Yeah, grit. Yeah, like on the DFAM, right? First I want to get the clean sound, and then I want just like the right level of like the noise to it. A peacock, a human voice, like, you know, a cello being bowed, a guitar string being bowed, piano being bowed. Those things have that natural texture of like noise built into sort of the friction of, and I think that that's what makes them so interesting and unique. And
Yeah.
you know, and in the case of the peacocks, like, I mean, there's just so much dynamic range to that, right?
I mean, even with the black flute, when we were trying to mix like the flute sound with vocals, it gave this interesting texture that was very, very sort of ethereal.
Yeah.
And I think blending instruments together is also a really fun thing to do because it's inspiring for what you're writing to.
Yeah. I mean, not to be too nerdy about it, but like I love the idea of like what comes together when sounds are playing together, right?
It's true.
You take the big size of like an orchestra and you have like years of experience of people performing their instrument, creating sound, and all these sound waves are like dancing around in the air, you know, and you dial that down to just two instruments, right? Like the black flute or even just a synth and a voice, or, you know, an imperfectly bowed instrument that's a little bit out of tune with a voice, right? And sometimes it's tricky. It's about like taste levels, because I feel like oftentimes it's hard to figure out how to get things to sort of blend together. And then when you do, it's like, it's a wonderful, like, sort of situation.
I think it helps to just keep thinking in terms of creating an outside the box rather than by rules.
Yeah.
Because then you'll really push boundaries, and then you'll find quickly what sonically just doesn't sound good and what does. And I think playing in that sort of sandbox is just a real joy.
Yeah, because the rules will ruin you. Because what's the if you think you stink, right?
That's your favorite.
Yeah,
really.
I love the if you think you stink.
You love
it's just
that.
like, let's try it. Yeah.
A lot of the horror things we've done tends to be sort of a skin of horror, but inside it's emotion. You know, it's very emotional. It's really a drama being disguised as horror. And I think a lot of that stuff spills into things like X-Men and Daredevil. Daredevil is incredibly dark, you know, and I think having those dark textures added to it really sort of cement the story and the grit of what is happening with like Matt Murdock and that entire world.
Yeah.
And the same with the X-Men. X-Men obviously are, you know, it's a lot more action and it's very, very heroic, but there's also moments of incredible darkness and emotionalness and vulnerability between like Magneto or, you know, whatever character is on screen. We're always wanting to find a sound that's unique. You know, you play that sound, it evokes something, it inspires you to sort of move forward and another level of creating.
It's about like being unique within that space and also finding the hope within that, right? There are moments to just be like, this is dark, there's no hope, it's gonna end poorly, like this is what you signed up for, sort of.
We've done that. Yeah.
We've done that.
I think you and I both come from a world of like, cool, we have this melody, great, we have the orchestra, you know, and let's make this unique. What can we do to make this distinct or different for this character or the city or whatever it may be?
Yeah.
You know, whether it's for Muse and or something in X-Men, I think finding something that is unique, that can work with the orchestra, but it's a sound or a tone or a texture that kind of combines, and maybe the listener isn't realizing, you know, that that's not brass they're hearing, that's a synthesizer, it's just sort of sounding like brass. But doubled up, it gives a sense of beefiness and warmth. And I think those kind of things, those little tricks really pay off in the end, as at least for me, when I hear it in other people's work, I really appreciate it.
And it's even interesting with that, with X-Men 97, right? Even in some of the scenes where it's very obvious what it should be, having like some of the palette of like weird sounds that we like to use is very helpful in a small amount, like just the right amount of salt on your French fries, basically, right? It's just like,
True.
let's just sprinkle this on, and that just gives a nice sort of like bit of weird to like,
Even in Daredevil, Fisk,
yeah,
just those, those car
yeah,
trunk recording hits you
yeah,
have, and those
yeah,
like weird, percussion hits, those kind of things really
yeah,
sort of feel the evocativeness of that character,
yeah.
the
Not
tension.
not sexy things, but things that are very like useful, right?
Well,
At
not
like,
sexy on their own, but
yeah, not sexy on their
tucked
own, but
in with
tucked in with
with the
everything.
orchestra,
Yeah,
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 process and sort of
yeah,
mixed in.
yeah,
Yeah, I think that's what makes this whole thing fun. Writing to existing IP projects that have already been established, we've gotten this question quite a bit, where it's like, what do you do? What is your approach to sort of addressing that? And I think it's different for every situation, but I think anything that's relatively new or that you associate as the series, like Star Wars, if you vary too much from that, the iconic element of whatever that is, I think it sort of, the fans become slightly disheartened about that.
yeah,
And I think we knew going into both X-Men 97 and into Daredevil that it was really important to sort of bring back the established, for X-Men 97, bring back the established theme and tone, and then slowly modernize it as the episodes progressed.
yeah,
And with Daredevil, I think it was very much about telling this new story. At the same time, he's Daredevil, so we're going to play the Daredevil theme that John wrote. And I think it's important to honor those things. And I think we've seen firsthand when you don't do that, what happens, and people don't like it. It was also important to expand on those universes, because although they are the same show, they are sort of an expansion and a new adaptation of those characters.
yeah.
And we know what the world is. It's now, what is a story we're going to tell, and I think it's a way to honor the old and sort of expand on the new.
It's helpful that you and I are fans of
Gotta be
these
fans.
properties,
Yeah.
because I think that like I want to hear da right, and similar with Daredevil, like you want to hear that, right? So whoever does it, if it wasn't us, I would want whoever is working on that to, you want to hear that on a different level. Like Doctor Sleep was a bit of that, right? Like this is
Very much so.
the sequel to The Shining. Like that needs to maintain sort of an idea of that. That needs to maintain that sort of emotional investment within the context of like where it's come from.
Yeah, and I think there's also the left field element, is like, what do the creatives want?
Of course, yeah.
And how is that going to
Yeah.
change the direction?
Yeah.
I think it's, when certain people aren't fans of instruments, or they want to go for something with different tonality, I think it changes also the way you're going to approach it. And
Yeah.
it's finding the balance of how much can I call back to that, to pleasing also elements, so everyone feels like it's telling the story that they've written or they've
Yeah.
created.
Yeah.
And I think that's an important job to do. And I think, as you mentioned in Doctor Sleep, I think Mike made it very clear. What's the sound of this other world, but it still needs to be an expansion of what The Shining was.
Yeah.
So how are we going to connect those two? How are we going to expand on that sonic sort of template? I mean, I think scoring for animation is a lot more work, when you agree, just in terms of just live action animation, just the amount of quickness at which things are moving, especially in a story like X-Men 97, like so many things are happening, and the quickness and the time frame at which it happens, the music is also supporting that. So it's a lot more in your face, more upfront, and it's changing quickly. Whereas something like Daredevil, there's time to build the emotion. It may be start off calmer or slower before it reaches that peak. And then I think in animation, it's just typically much more faster.
Yeah. Your foot is on the gas, and even when it's not, it's going to shift like really quickly.
Yeah.
And that's not to say it won't in live action, but I think in live action it's a little more of a like you said, there's just more time to expand on thematic material and sort of like take your time with entrances and exits from cues.
Take your time is
Take your time.
definitely the added element, I
Yeah.
would say. Yeah.
Yeah.
Animation is less time.
Yeah, yeah. There's almost no time. It's just like we're into the next scene. We're going
Yeah.
here. We're going there. Yeah.
Yeah, I would say it's even sometimes more difficult in the terms of emotion because you have a shorter period to state a theme or an element. And a lot of those kind of projects, it needs to have something iconic.
Yeah.
And we've been very fortunate because, we've been given sections where we can showcase a piece like Storm or something or Magneto. And, but sometimes other characters, we may have a motif for them or a theme, but we only have 10 seconds to play. So it's like, because it's condensed, it's shorter. So I think that makes it a little more tricky. It's like, what are you going to do in 3 seconds or 5 seconds?
Yeah.
And I think that's a much more difficult of a challenge than something that's, like live action.
Yeah. Agreed. Dun, 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 dun.